Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members of this honorable body. The purpose of House Bill 626 is to ensure that the General Assembly has an opportunity to legislate without interference from people who wish to prevent us from doing our work on behalf of our constituents. Now, don't get me wrong, there is absolutely nothing wrong with protesting and making an attempt to have your voice heard. As a matter of fact, I adamantly support that for our citizens of this Commonwealth and across this country. I said in committee, protesting is as American as apple pie. It's part of the foundation of who we are, and I'm fully supportive of that. But when you prevent a legislative body from doing its work, then you cross the line. House Bill 626 was drawn up with three specific scenarios in mind. First, when you physically obstruct or impede a legislator or legislative employee's ability to go into a room or go from one room to another with the intent to prevent the General Assembly from conducting its business, you cross a line. In this first section, if that were to be the case, it would be a Class B misdemeanor for the first offense, a Class A misdemeanor for the second offense. And I will mind you, and I'll get to in the end of my discussion here in just a moment, currently it's a Class A misdemeanor for what is being used. So this is a lower offense. Second, when you enter into a legislative chamber or a room that is set aside for use of legislators or refuse to exit with the intent to prevent the General Assembly from conducting their business, you cross the line. Again, this would be a Class B misdemeanor. Third, when you engage in disorderly or disruptive conduct inside a legislative building and you actually prevent the General Assembly from conducting business, then you've crossed the line. This would be a Class A misdemeanor for the first offense, a Class D felony for any second or subsequent offense. I believe this is important to enact statutes tailored to deal with this issue instead of simply relying on the more general offenses we find in KRS 519-020 for obstructing government operations, which seems more appropriate for an attempt to prevent an executive branch agency from doing its work. That's a Class A misdemeanor. We all remember what happened last year in this very body, and those folks ended up being charged with criminal trespassing. I would argue that that doesn't necessarily fit either. This is a public place, that criminal trespassing wouldn't fit that. So we really don't have anything in statute that fits a situation for someone who crosses that line and is trying to obstruct or impede the legislative process. Our judicial branch judges have the power to deal with interruptions in the courtroom by use of criminal contempt proceedings if necessary. This bill would provide an equivalent protection for our legislative branch. That's all we're trying to do. We're not trying to prevent anyone from being able to exercise their First Amendment rights. We're just saying when you cross that line to going to the point where the General Assembly cannot conduct its business. And going back to last year, if you'll recall, there were many of you that had your buttons to push last year that wanted to speak, that had your voices for your constituents silenced because we just had to move on and take the vote. It got so out of control. So they were trying to impede our process. And all we're trying to do is put some language in statute that allows for this type of behavior. With that, Mr. Speaker, if there's no questions, I would move passage of House Bill 626.